In 1991, in the north of Spain, a group of politicians sat in a meeting room trying to keep their city from disappearing. The factories were shutting down one by one. The river in the city center was so polluted that fish hadn't lived in it for decades. Unemployment was spiking, young people were fleeing, and on top of that, a terrorist organization was setting off bombs in the streets. They were desperate and knew that ordinary measures wouldn't help. So they decided to spend 100 million euros on a building. The building that would eventually make their city so attractive that tourists would fly from all over the world just to stand in front of it. That would generate over 400 million euros a year for the city's budget. The building that was designed with aerospace software and covered with titanium from Soviet atomic submarines. It's not a stadium, not a casino, not a theme park. It's a museum of contemporary art in Bilbao. How does a soot-stained industrial port city pull off the most audacious urban turnaround of the 20th century? To understand what happened, you need to understand just how bad things were. Bilbao sits in the Basque Country, a fiercely proud autonomous region in northern Spain. For over a century, the city was a powerhouse: steel mills, shipyards, iron ore. The Nervion River, which cuts right through the heart of the city, was essentially an industrial highway, choked with barges and thick with chemical runoff. At its peak, Bilbao was one of the wealthiest cities in Spain. The Basques had money, they had identity, they had industry, and then the bottom fell out. The 1970s global oil crisis hit manufacturing cities everywhere like a freight train. Steel demand collapsed. Shipbuilding moved to Asia, where labor was cheaper. Unemployment exploded. Poverty spread through working-class neighborhoods. The riverbanks, once buzzing with cranes and workers, now were ruins. Abandoned warehouses, corroded iron, a river so toxic it ran gray. And while the city watched the workforce disappear, ETA, the Basque separatist group, was conducting bombings and assassinations. Bilbao wasn't just economically depressed, it felt dangerous. City officials had two choices: double down on industry, try to revive what already was dying, or make one of the boldest gambles in modern history. So in 1991, a group of Basque government officials reached out to a foundation in New York City, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation, one of the most prestigious names in the art world. Their pitch was simple and completely audacious. Come, build a museum here. We'll pay for everything. And they meant it, everything. The Basque government agreed to cover the full $100 million construction cost. They created a $50 million fund to buy art. They paid a one-time $20 million fee just for the right to use the Guggenheim name. And they committed to subsidizing the museum's $12 million annual operating budget. In exchange, the Guggenheim Foundation would manage the institution, rotate masterworks from its collection, and organize world-class temporary exhibitions. Now, the Guggenheim Foundation didn't exactly suffer in this deal, but this was still a massive, almost reckless bet for Bilbao. Critics inside the city were furious. Basque nationalists called it cultural imperialism, handing over a flagship institution to an American foundation. Artists protested that the money should go to local culture. Politicians nearly lost jobs over it. But the deal went through. And then they had to figure out who was going to actually design the thing. The shortlist included some of the greatest architects alive: Coop Himmelblau, Arata Isozaki, Frank Gehry. Gehry was already famous in architecture circles, but he was not what you'd call conventional. His buildings looked like they'd been crumpled by hand and left to dry. Swooping metal curves, deconstructed forms. When Gehry flew to Bilbao and saw the site, a polluted post-industrial wasteland next to a river bend, he decided to design a building that would look like a ship. To actually build the curves he imagined, Gehry's team used software called CATIA, aerospace design software, the kind used to build fighter jets. This was 1992. Using aerospace software to design a museum was completely unheard of. Without it, the building would have been physically impossible to construct. Construction began in 1993. Gary's original plan was actually to use stainless steel.
It's a rainy climate, and so stainless steel went dead. By accident, I had a piece of titanium, and I looked at it and I put it out on a post, and it rained and it turned golden and it felt right, and so I said, that's what we got to use.
But the price, still a deal breaker. And then history handed them a miracle. Right at that moment, the Soviet Union collapsed. Russia's enormous state titanium industry, which had spent decades producing the metal for military submarines, suddenly had massive stockpiles and zero customers. Titanium flooded the world market. The price crashed so dramatically that it became cheaper than polished stainless steel. So they went with titanium. 33,000 panels, each one unique, each shaped to follow the impossible curves of Gary's design. The sheets were laminated in Pittsburgh, rolled to just 0.4 millimeters thin, thinner than a credit card, and then shipped to Bilbao. But even though the panels were lightweighted, their installation became an issue. The building's curvy shape made it physically impossible for cranes or scaffolding to reach every surface. So the contractors brought in professional mountain climbers, who panel by panel fixed each one by hand, dangling above the Nervion River with ropes and good balance. The most technologically advanced building of its era was finished by people with ropes. The building was completed in June 1997, on schedule and within its original budget. For a project of this scale and ambition, that alone was considered something close to a miracle. When it was unveiled, architectural critic Paul Goldberger called it a signal moment in the architectural culture. Philip Johnson, the godfather of American architecture, reportedly said it was the greatest building of our time. But before you even reach the front door, the building ambushes you with two sculptures that might have become icons in their own right. The first thing most visitors see is Puppy, a 12-meter-tall West Highland Terrier, completely covered in living flowers, stands guard at the entrance. Over 38 bedding plants maintained by a hidden internal irrigation system. Jeff Koons designed it to make you feel, in his own words, confidence and security. It's ridiculous and magnificent at the same time, and it's almost impossible to walk past it without smiling. What almost nobody knows is that Puppy nearly became a crime scene. Days before the 1997 inauguration, 3 ETA militants disguised themselves as the gardeners standing to the sculpture. Inside their flower pots, they hid 12 remote-controlled grenades, aimed at the ceremony where King Juan Carlos was about to stand. A Basque police officer intercepted them. He was shot and killed. The opening went ahead anyway, with the King of Spain cutting the ribbon, surrounded by thousands of citizens. On the other side of the building, closer to the river, something more unsettling waits. Maman, French for mummy, is a 9-meter-tall bronze spider, its spindly legs arching over the promenade, a sack of marble eggs hanging from its abdomen. Louise Bourgeois made it a tribute to her mother, who was a tapestry weaver. 2 sculptures. One makes you laugh, one makes your skin prickle. Yet they both fit perfectly for the Museum of Contemporary and Modern Art. Within 3 years, nearly 4 million tourists had visited a mid-sized industrial city in northern Spain that most of the world had never heard of before. The tourism revenue in those first 3 years exceeded the entire cost of building the museum. Hotels opened, restaurants filled up, new businesses flooded in. Between 1998 and 2009 alone, the museum helped create an estimated 45,000 regional jobs. By 2003, 43% of all visitors were coming from abroad. But the Guggenheim didn't work alone. Bilbao's transformation was actually a coordinated urban plan. While it was being built, the city was also doing something unglamorous, cleaning the Nervion River. Decades of industrial sludge cleared out, new public parks built along the banks. A brand new metro system opened in 1995, designed by Norman Foster, another world-class architect. Euskalduna Concert Hall went up nearby, the airport was expanded. A sleek pedestrian bridge, the Zabizuri, designed by Santiago Calatrava, was strung across the river. Old industrial buildings were torn down or converted. Before the Guggenheim opened, Bilbao hosted fewer than 80 cultural events a year. Within a decade of the opening, that number topped 1,000. The population, which had been declining for years, stabilized and started growing again. Today, the Guggenheim Bilbao contributes an estimated 762 million euros per year to the regional economy. Since opening, the total economic impact has reached 7.7 billion euros. The museum returns to the Basque treasury 10 times what it receives in public funding. Economists scrambled to explain it. They named it the Bilbao or Guggenheim effect. The Bilbao effect became the most envied urban strategy in the world. Cities from Malaga to Milwaukee, from Marseille to Abu Dhabi tried to replicate it. Almost none of them worked. Helsinki tried twice. The second time they even ran a full international architecture competition, and then the parliament killed it anyway. They didn't want American culture branding on their waterfront. Abu Dhabi announced their Guggenheim in 2006, designed by Frank Gehry himself. Nearly 20 years later, still not open. Rio, Vilnius, Salzburg, Guadalajara, all serious negotiations, all died on the table. Because what none of them truly understood is that Bilbao wasn't selling a formula. It was telling a story about itself, about a society that looked at the ruins of its industrial past and chose, collectively, to bet on beauty instead. And their story proved something cities still struggle to accept. Culture is not a luxury you invest in after the economy recovers. It is the recovery. Heavy industry built this city once. Art rebuilt it. And the people who showed up, who protested, who voted, who fought for the river to be clean and kept tending the flowers on Poppy every single season, they were the ones who made it work. The building is Frank Gehry's, but the miracle belongs to Bilbao. What was the most impressive building you've ever seen in real life? As for me, I was totally impressed by the City of Arts and Sciences in Valencia, also in Spain, but the story there is completely different. And if you want to watch it, here is the link.